Good afternoon and welcome back to another episode of Since I Was Young podcast for all things Heart of Midlothian. And well, where to begin? Hearts have, in the last, 2 weeks or less than that, have appointed a new manager and have won a domestic league fixture, which is a nice change, but there's never a dull moment as a Hearts supporter. That must be honest. Anyway, as I say, I'm delighted today to be joined by John. As per usual, he's becoming a bit more of a fixture on the channel these days, and his presence is greatly appreciated. Before we get dived into all the nitty gritty and the actual discussion that's going to take a positive form this week, as per usual, folks, links for our socials are in the description. Please consider heading down, dropping a subscription to the YouTube channel as well. You can find us on Spotify, the links are all there. So please, as I say, your support is massively, massively appreciated. So if you would be so kind as to do so, that would be brilliant. But yes, as I said, obviously the Since I Was Young timing curse came into effect. We did an episode just last week, John and myself, and barely 48 hours later, all of the managerial drama unfolded, which began with news of a potential appointment of a Norwegian coach, the former Norwegian manager, Matthias Per Hogman, his name was leaked in the media, and apparently was the leading candidate for the job. And then barely 3 hours after, talks had broken down supposedly, and fast forward to today, and we find ourselves under the guidance of ex-Blackpool manager Neil Critchley. So yeah, that kind of sums up where we left and where we are now. But yeah, John, what did you think about all that kind of drama that unfolded with the managerial situation?
Well, not to toot one's horn too much, but I kind of called it on Hogbo on the last show. You sent me the clip after the fact, right after talks broke down, of me kind of saying that we shouldn't get too excited until pen was put to paper on a new manager. It looks like he potentially was looking for more than Hearts were willing to offer, or wanted more in terms of assurances or being able to put his stamp on the club than Hearts were willing to give away. I believe Andrew McKinley's comments during Critchley's introduction press conference were quite telling, and that he used the words that Critchley was the only manager that we negotiated with, which means that he impressed them in a way that no other candidate did. And I think that it seemed to me, from listening to McKinley's comments at the press conference, that Critchley quite quickly became the key candidate and the guy that they wanted. It's easy enough in retrospect after Saturday, which obviously we're going to get into, to see why. But when Critchley was appointed at the time, I was unimpressed, but I wasn't as disappointed as a lot of Hearts supporters seem to have been.
Yeah.
I very much had an approach of a wait and see. I was excited to see what a new manager could bring to the table, especially a guy who has never been involved in Scottish football. I'm glad it wasn't a McInnes or a Stephen Robinson or any of those kind of guys. I feel like the old Pals Act has worn thin. I think the decision to go with Critchley, a 46-year-old who has quite a lot of quite rich experience. He's not just been Blackpool manager, I believe, twice. He coached at Liverpool under Jurgen Klopp. He's got quite a bit of pedigree that folk just don't seem to be giving him credit for. That's where Jan Danda knows him from, I believe, because I think it was Danda in the Liverpool youth setup coming through.
Yeah, I was under 23s.
Um,
I think Critchley might have even
yeah,
his debut at that level.
yeah. So this is a guy who has a bit more pedigree than he's been getting credit for. His comments at his initial press conference delighted me. The fact that he sunk himself into several days of watching every Hearts game so far this year to pick apart what had been going wrong was immediately just impressive to me. The fact that he is picking up on so much detail, and little details as well, really excites me in the early hours of his appointment. My initial reaction, lukewarm, but certainly not extremely poor like a lot of people's have been
Yeah.
initially. The vitriol, I think, that a lot of fans, and unfortunately, it's emblematic of a fairly large swaths of our fan base, that they're just maybe it's impossible to please some people.
Yeah.
It's probably the case at every football club, but certainly, just give the guy a chance, to give him enough rope to hang himself with, as the old saying goes. Give him a chance to fail.
Yeah, completely. I think that's fair. I think, where I was going to go next was the reaction to the actual appointment itself. And like you say, some of the things that were out there were bordering on embarrassing, to be honest with you. I did
Yeah.
a clip for the Facebook page. I did a clip for that when Critchley was appointed, and asked for people's comments and what they thought about the appointment. And a vast majority of the people were saying, the guy needs a chance, he deserves a chance. But then there was obviously the odd appointment or the odd comment saying, he wasn't what we expected, that's not ambitious,
Mm.
etc., etc. And I made the point on that clip. If you've not seen it, please go and watch it. I'm trying to put some more out there just for content's sake. Effectively, my view on it was, I think a lot of our fan base look at what's happened with Aberdeen and kind of think we should be doing that. That's the route that we should be going down. And then, like, Andrew McKinley spoke about it in one of the recent updates that he did prior to obviously the appointment, and he said, about being asked if it was going to be a non-British manager or what the sort of setup was going to be or what they were looking for. And he just kind of said, he was like, we're not ruling it out, but equally, to just say, oh, because Aberdeen have done it, then that's the trendy thing. Effectively, was what kind of Andrew McKinley sort of said. He was like, just because Aberdeen have done it doesn't necessarily mean it'll be a success everywhere. It's kind of like flavour of the month stuff. And I think quite a lot of our fan base, maybe, and I'm not going to sit here and excuse myself, because I said the same on one of the last episodes that Ewan and I did together just a few weeks ago there, where we spoke about the managerial candidates, and I reeled off a list of about 5 or 6 Norwegians and Swedish managers that had been linked with the job through things that I'd heard and read. But again, that all stems from Jimmy Fallon at Aberdeen getting that job and doing as well as they have. So I do think there was an element of jealousy, maybe envy from some of our fan base, thinking, oh, we should do that. That's what we need to do. But the simple fact, and one of the main reasons as to why, in my view, that's just not possible at the moment, is purely based off of the kind of managers that we were looking at. I saw obviously the Bodo Glimt manager, whose name escapes me at the moment, Knudsen, I think it was, actually. It's just come back to me there. And there were a few others that were obviously linked that are at the top end of their leagues. But those domestic seasons have got 5 or 6 games to go. If you're managing the second team, it was Bran, I think, was the other one. The manager Bran, the manager Rosenborg. There's been loads of names linked. But if you're fighting for a title in your domestic league with 5 or 6 games to go, no matter how attractive the Hearts job is, and it is an attractive job, we spoke about it previously, you're not going to drop a possibility of winning a league title to come to a side that's bottom of the table, where the pressure and the expectation
100%.
would be massive. So I think fans maybe needed to, at the time, maybe have a dose of reality and kind of say,
yeah,
like, again, I'd spoken to Ewan about this, about the long term and the short term objectives of Hearts and what way we were going to look at it. And you go, in my view, is Neil Critchley a long term appointment? Is he going to be focusing on that? Not immediately. Short term, it to me at least, it feels very much like a short term appointment. Not that I'm saying he's going to be away soon. I hope he's not, because if he is, then that would obviously mean he's not been successful. But to me, and the way that Neil Critchley was speaking, and like you touched on sort of in his press conference and things, he came straight out and said exactly what was wrong. He said, look, we've not been good enough in both boxes. That needs to improve. If you want to get off the bottom of the table, that's necessary. You can't be leaky at the back and short up front. You need at least one of those two things to click. And obviously on the weekend there against St. Mirren, which we'll touch on later, there was a massive improvement in that. But yeah, I think, like you, I was a bit underwhelmed with the Critchley appointment. I'm not going to deny it. I think most people were. I don't think I knew one Hearts fan that was going, yeah, he was my first choice candidate, because nobody really saw it coming. But I think the reaction of Hearts fans has kind of bled into the media, and it's made it easy for them to kind of already attack him as well. I saw Michael Stewart, and again, Michael Stewart's one of these guys that I don't tend to pay a huge amount of attention to, but I saw him talking about he doesn't strike me as the sort of person that will be able to inspire and lead. And I'm like, what are you on about? Like, you're feeding that sort of mentality to the Hearts supporters, and that was after the game against St Mirren, by the way. That was after full time in
yeah.
that game. So again, I take Michael Stewart's
Michael
opinion.
Michael Stewart Michael Stewart having a go at someone's ability to inspire and lead is just laughable. we remember his tenure as captain of Heart of Midlothian Football Club. He
So
should
true.
just, this is one he should stay out of. If I could just
Absolutely.
jump in,
Of course.
the very same fans who were crying out for a Swedish appointment. It's important to note that Sweden is not leading Aberdeen to an unbeaten start so far this year. Jimmy Thalen is, and the chances of landing a second Jimmy Thalen in the division within weeks are slim to none. He is doing exceptional work at Aberdeen, but like you say, just because he is succeeding does not mean that any Swedish manager that you plop into the SPL is going to do the same. And
Completely.
I wonder, to your point, would those same fans who were clamouring for something along those lines have been happy to be patient and wait 7, 8 weeks for the Swedish domestic season to end before making an appointment? Or would they have been blowing a gasket within a few weeks that we still don't have a permanent manager in place?
Yeah,
That's what I
completely,
mean by
completely.
it's impossible to keep some people happy. Like if we had said, yeah, we're going to bring in this Swedish appointment, who's he's up there at the top kind of 2, 3 in the Swedish Premier League, but we can't bring him in until the end of the Swedish domestic season because he wants to try and win this title. So many people would absolutely blow a gasket at that. Instead, we've brought in a guy who has a decent pedigree, who has proven himself to the Hearts board during the interview process. I believe he was interviewed at least twice and then came in to speak with them at least another twice after they really started to consider him as a candidate. He's clearly done his homework on the club. He's clearly done his homework on what needs to be done. The Hearts board had over 100 registrations of interest and probably almost as many applications. They've waded through so many candidates. They've spoken to so many people. They've been so impressed by Critchley that they were willing to negotiate with him. Whatever that means, we're never going to know that. But that's exactly what Andrew McKinley said. They have done their job, I think. And while, yeah, he's not a marquee name, I hesitate to use a comparison to George Burley, but I'm going to later when we talk about the St Mirren game in a very specific way that I hope
Okay.
will make sense at the time. Um, George Burley wasn't exactly a massive household name when he was appointed. And he had a phenomenal time at Hearts. So unfortunately, it was cut tragically short by the madman that was in charge of Hearts at the time. But I'll get back to that later when we're talking about the St Mirren game. For now,
Yeah.
though, that was just a point I wanted to make of like, give the board a bit of credit, have a bit of faith in Andrew McKinley's vast ability to do his job. He, as CEO, has seen the finances at Hearts improve so much, the facilities at Hearts improve so much. Give the guy a bit of credit. He knows what he's doing,
Yeah.
and so does the board behind him. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, these people would not have been happy either if we had
No.
said we need to wait 7, 8 weeks before we appoint a new manager.
Yeah, no, definitely. I completely agree with that, to be honest with you. And we'll kind of move it into the game against St Mirren on the weekend there. Obviously, news prior to the game that Liam Fox had been given an assistant head coach's role with the first team, which I think you and I will both agree is just deserves for what he's done.
Fully deserved.
Yeah, in
Absolutely.
terms of taking the team in the interim and maybe just putting a wee bit more sort of, I don't even know if it was confidence, maybe just getting the players enjoying themselves a bit more again and kind of doing things in a simple way. And I think Critchley has kind of taken that on board as well, which obviously leads into why Liam Fox was involved. Liam Fox
Yep.
obviously took the training for the first, I think, day or two. He was involved in training with the first team, and he was pictured in all the sort of media stuff. So I think him being named amongst Critchley's staff was kind of inevitable at that point. And I'm really, really pleased to see that. Obviously, Liam Fox is a Heart supporter and has previous. So, having people like that around Neil Critchley, who, and like I say, they both seem to have similar outlooks on what we should be doing in terms of, we spoke about this before. What happens if a new manager comes in and just rips it all up and starts again? I don't think that was ever likely to happen. Certainly not in the short term anyway, because we can't afford to effectively have these players relearn a different system, a different shape, because like I'm sure it was you that said it, that's sort of like a preseason thing, and that's what Liam Fox should have been doing or whatever earlier. But obviously, Neil Critchley's come in and been impressed with the group of players he's inherited. He said as such in the media. He said, I've come into a dressing room that is a good bunch of lads, and the morale is good. The morale is better than you would expect for a side that's bottom of the table. And that's something that I think is a positive. Obviously, the players will know where they are and they won't be happy about it, but you don't want them all to be down in the dumps in training and feeling sorry for themselves. You want them to be firing and trying to get out of trouble, which I think is effectively what Neil Critchley sort of hinted at. But yeah, like I say, we go into the St Mirren game on the weekend, full of. I mean, I was confident because I felt like there's nowhere to hide for these players now. New manager is in. He's kind of said what he wants to do without really going into too much detail, which is something else that I really liked. They were trying to press him to see how he was going to set the team up, and he basically said, "Not telling you anything. We'll wait to the weekend," which I thought was really good. Give them nothing. And yeah, look, when we went to the game, obviously, I was confident of a result, but like I said to you prior to kickoff, give me a 1-0 scrappy win and I'll take it right now. We just need something to get us going. And I think I'm sure that's a view that you share as well.
100%. Yeah, I think our last words before kickoff were, I'd take a scrappy 1-0, me saying, yeah, me too. And then your last words right before kickoff were, they've nowhere to hide now. And that was essentially the tone that we had going in. And I think that the players very clearly responded to that. I think the fan base was expectant in a way that we haven't been for quite a while ahead of the game. There was a great atmosphere at Tynecastle on Saturday. Um, and yeah, very quickly it became obvious that Critchley had set them up in such a way as to press the home field advantage. They weren't giving St Mirren any time on the ball in the early stages, and what we noticed as well was that while we have started a number of games in a similar fashion this year, we haven't maintained it. The boys have gotten very frustrated after 10, 15 minutes of not being able to capitalise on any of the chances they're creating early. But there just seemed to be a different energy about them in the early stages of Saturday's game, and of course that did pay off. Um, but yeah, pre-kickoff, quite confident, but at the same time, it wasn't so much a confidence; it was more an expectance. It was like, right,
Yeah,
now they don't have an excuse. Um, Naismith is away. Liam Fox, I think the job he's done of taking the square pegs and popping them into the square holes has been massively, massively valuable. And I wonder if Critchley has come in and specifically asked that Liam Fox be promoted. Um, I can see that being the case where he's seen the work that Liam Fox has done. Like we said earlier, he has seen every game. And I'm wondering if when he's come in and he's seen training the first couple of days, he's said to the board, like, I want Liam to be a permanent fixture on the bench in the first team. Because he has, I mean, you titled the last podcast "Steady the Ship," and that's the perfect words to use, I think. But yeah, going in, I would have taken it 1-0. I kind of expected it to be far scrappier. St Mirren, I was expecting way better from St Mirren on Saturday, that's for sure.
yeah. I think that's fair. I think just before we sort of talk through like the good start that we made, I remember you and I having a conversation prior to the game when the team news was out, and the only sort of not concern, the only issue that I could see was having Benny Beningame and Malachi Boateng as a two in midfield. I
Yeah,
wasn't
don't
sure
we
about
look
that.
stupid now?
To be fair, I wasn't the only one. I
You
think
know, I was the same.
my
Yeah.
thoughts on it were very much both players are kind of similar, and is that going to work? And do we really need two defensive ball winners in a midfield against St
Mm.
Mirren? Turns out the way that we started the game and the way that the game progressed, we didn't actually realize from our angle where we were sitting, you couldn't really see what the system was, but it was a 4-4-2 of sorts. Or I knew you'd be happy about that. I think
They should have given me the job weeks ago, Alan. Who else do you know that loves a 4-4-2 and uses terms like the best form of defence is attack?
that's it. I feel like I'm
I
interviewing
knew it.
Critchley right now, to be honest with
How
you.
many times do I need to tell people?
Yeah. But yeah, I think we could see right from the very, very start how it was going to play out. I think the first sort of
Yeah.
chance that I remember was James Penrice whipping a cross in, and it didn't come to anything. But you could see with Penrice and Oyegoki how forward they were getting and how much license they were given to do that. And it was just refreshing to see, like, as I say, Benny and Boateng in the midfield were fantastic together. I think Benny we preach love of Benny Beningame all the time on this podcast, but his ability to sort of carry the ball forward is something that I think for me is just a massive, massive bonus. And Boateng looks a player on the ball as well. Like they're not your sort of playmaker types, but they're going to recover the ball. They're going to play it on to the ones that can do that. In this instance, obviously we had Danda on one side and Spittle on the other, with Shankland and Vargas up front together. And I think the space that was created for Danda and Spittle on the wide areas was huge. And that was obviously as a testament to Oyegoke on the right and Penrice on the left, just getting forward as well and occupying defenders. And like you said, we pinned St Mirren back. And yeah, look, I expected a lot more from St Mirren, I'm not going to lie. But I think our approach, and I think I said it to you as well, I can't tell whether St Mirren have just been awful or we've been very good. And I think we kind of came to a compromise that, yeah, we've made them look awful because of how we've played the game.
Yeah.
And I know we said obviously it was a 4-4-2, but at times it was like a 4-2-4, and they spoke about it on Sports Scene. Again, it was nice and refreshing to actually get to watch Sports Scene. I've not watched it for a while due to us being utterly dreadful, and not really wanting to rewatch it for that side of things. But yeah, I think it was Neil McCann spoke about it and said, the front four was so effective, and obviously that linked up with the first goal, which came after 15 minutes. It was the ball was recovered, played into Shankland, who, by Shankland standards, I thought he had quite a quiet day in terms of what you'd want to see from Shankland. But again, I'll touch on him later on because I want to touch on something else that happened later on in the game. But the one touch, intricate passing, and the little dink through that he plays for Vargas, and Vargas scores it. And this is the frustration that I have with Vargas, in the sense of I really like him when he doesn't have time to think about what he's going to do. I think he's a very instinctive kind of finisher. I don't think, like, his end product isn't great. Let's be honest, his output's not. I mean, that's his first goal of the season, which is good for him. But yeah, I think when he's in a position where he's got time to think, looking back at the Aberdeen game with that chip over the bar, he's got time to think about something. 9 times out of 10, he'll make the wrong choice. But that finish for the first goal, it was just, he just had to be there and get something on it. And he does very, very well, because he is kind of slipping or falling backwards a little bit when he hits it. So yeah, like, as I say, the Shankland assist was sublime though, and I don't think enough has been said about that little sort of dink around the corner and the perfect weight on it. But yeah, it was a fantastic way to start the game after just 15 minutes.
Absolutely agree. Yeah, hopefully that will steady Vargas a bit, and I think he's been a bit jumpy about getting that first goal of the season, I feel like, and that has led to him making maybe not even so much the wrong choice, but the selfish choice in a lot of opportunities, like for instance the aforementioned chip at Aberdeen. Shankland's touch was absolutely fantastic. I felt, put in an excellent shift, although he had a quiet game by his standards in terms of attacking output. The work he did in the behind the forward line, if you will, I thought was extremely valuable on Saturday. Obviously, he was carrying a hamstring problem from prior to the Scotland game, so you're not going to see him going up for headers as much. You're not going to see him battering into the box. So the way that he kind of took a step back and played more of a supporting role, he did a fantastic job of it. That wee dink into the area for Vargas's run was superb, like you say. I felt that Benny Beningame's pass to Shankland as well was very well picked out. Just a very well worked first goal. And Vargas, hopefully, like I say, this steadies him a bit, and you can start to provide that more consistently, because that's what we need from him more than anything, is consistency, because he's quite obviously a very talented player. He's only, I think, 21 years old as well, or maybe 22. Mm-hmm. He's not that old, so I think he just needs more experience at this level. And more of these chances to go his way, and then the confidence will start to flow in a more productive way. Oftentimes he can appear overconfident because he's got the confidence but doesn't have the finishing product. If he add the finishing product to that confidence, he could potentially go on and have a monster season from here out. It's entirely in his hands ultimately.
Yeah, I think as well, the system and the shape that Critchley has played in that St Mirren game, I think that benefited him. I think, you know, like you spoke about Shanklin kind of dropping deeper and sort of playing as the sort of link up support man, and I think he definitely was that. And having Vargas as that pace, because that's the one thing I will say about the Hearts attack is that there is a lack of pace aside from Vargas. But you know, Critchley spoke after the game about being able to break the lines and stretch the defence, and having somebody like Vargas available to do that is a big bonus, especially in this league, because there's not a lot of quick defenders in Scottish football. If the space is in behind them, if you can get in there, you've got opportunities, and that's something that I think we need to capitalise on a bit more. If that takes something out of Shanklin's game, that's maybe a concern. But if other areas of the team are contributing, which obviously they all did on the weekend, then you kind of weighing it up with the positives and the negatives. I think, you know, again, I said it to you, I think it was at 3-0 or something. I said, you know, it's strange to be in this position and Shanklin not be on the score sheet. But like you say, I thought he put in a decent shift. I think he certainly has been told to stop drifting all over the place and just stick to one area, which I think is another big bonus. But then as the first half kind of went on, it was a bit, I'm not going to say it was a bit flat, but I think getting that first goal gives you that confidence, gives you that belief to sort of go, right, we're in the lead here, you know, and it's we've not taken the lead for a while in a game. So to be able to, well, to be able to do that and have the confidence of scoring the first goal, I think was a huge bonus.
I can only agree, as per usual, Alan. We did seem to fall a bit flat after the first goal. Probably more so after the second goal, to be honest. And I know that Critchley had mentioned that in his post-match comments that at 2-0 he felt that we could have kept the ball a lot better. Um, it's it's funny because like normally 1-0 is a difficult scoreline for the team that scores. Like they always say you're the most vulnerable to attack right after you score. At no point did St Mirren ever give us a fright in terms of like an indication that they were going to do just that though. Like so the fact that our Hearts had such a drop off in intensity after the first goal was quite confusing to me. Um, I don't know if it's maybe just been residual confidence issues, from the horrible start that we've had to the season, because there have been so many times this year that we've looked positive going into the first kind of 20 minutes or so, and then afterwards have then conceded due to individual errors, which fortunately were pretty much entirely absent in this past weekend's game. That's certainly one area where we have improved markedly in just a few days that Critchley's been in charge by the looks of things. You know, we've seemed a hell of a lot more disciplined. And I don't know if that's potentially played into the fact that we dropped off a wee bit in intensity. It's maybe been a conscious effort on the players' part to make sure that they kept that discipline and kept their shape and kept that organisation. But yeah, Shanklin's performance on the first goal, fantastic. Overall, I felt he put in a good shift. The front four, like Neil McCann said, and like you just kind of paraphrased there, pretty much faultless. The midfield two played a huge part in it. They felt like they settled everyone around them so much. And yeah, a bit of a drop off in intensity after the first goal, but like I say, I think that might have potentially just been a conscious effort on their part to make sure that they kept the organisation and they made sure that what happened in so many games already this year didn't happen this time around, and it certainly didn't. At no point did I feel like St Mirren had us in any danger of that happening. They were pretty poor overall.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think, like I say, the first half, you know, when you go 1-0 up, it is always that sort of nervy, right? Plus, we've seen this story before. Hearts trying to hold on to a lead is not something that we've
Yeah.
been particularly good at for a while. So yeah, there was maybe a little bit of nervous energy in that sense, but obviously we get to half time at 1-0 and the second half starts, and then obviously we have to talk about Oyegoki, a player that again I've been probably underwhelmed or maybe not quite convinced about him in terms of, is he good enough to play at right back for us? Is he good enough to be a starting right back for us? Which I think obviously at the meantime he has to be. While Gerald Taylor's out, he certainly will be. The fight is obviously between him and Adam Forrester. And yeah, I again, this might be a humble pie eating moment. I thought against Aberdeen when I watched it back, I know I said last episode that I wasn't overly convinced about him. He wasn't bad against Aberdeen, but he was better against St Mirren by a distance. And I think a large spell of that is because he wasn't really tested defensively as much as maybe he was against Aberdeen. But the license to get forward, the license to be involved further up the pitch, like I spoke about at the start, was evident. And you could tell that he was enjoying himself playing with Danda in front of him. They seemed
Yes.
to have a nice little link up. And you mentioned that I've maybe just nicked one of your points there, but he certainly looked a lot more confident on the ball than I was expecting him to be. But that second goal, we have to talk about it. There's a reason why Daniel Oyugoki won man of the match, and I think that is a huge part of it. But I think his all-round game was very, very good. But the goal itself, and again, you and I didn't really appreciate the goal at the time, but
Yeah.
he just he just picks the ball up and just keeps going with it. I think Critchley mentioned in his after match interview that he was shouting for Oyugoki to lay it into, I think it was Vargas that was on his outside, because there would have been a 2v1 against a St Mirren defender.
Mhm.
So that was what Critchley was bellowing at him to do. And Oyugoki just cuts inside. And again, I didn't appreciate it, but on his weak foot, he unleashes a curling effort that the St Mirren goalkeeper was nowhere near. And I thought the St Mirren goalkeeper for the whole game, to be honest, I thought he was questionable. But that particular goal, he couldn't do anything about it, could he?
I don't know that even Craig Gordon could have done anything about that, mate. And you know how in denial I live about any potential mishaps that Craig Gordon might ever have made.
Yeah, it was.
Um, an absolute beezer of a goal. To the fact that it was on his weaker foot as well, I didn't even register that initially. But the touch with the outside of his left foot to set up the shot as well was just tremendous. I don't think anyone, like you touched on there, was happier to see Jan Danda in the starting lineup alongside him than Daniel Oyugoki. I felt that both of them linked up tremendously at the back, in the back of the right back and in the right wing. Um, and so the confidence that that seemed to give him as the game progressed, when I think he was seeing Danda in front of him and how well Danda played, who I think his performance is probably going to be quite easy to lose in the shuffle with, he didn't get in the score sheet. There was no kind of fancy moment for Danda in this game. But he put in a fantastic shift and he delivered quite a few decent balls into the area as well.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, the average height of St Mirren's defenders seems to be 7 feet 2, and height is not something Heart of Midlothian are blessed with all that well.
fair.
But yeah, Daniel Oyugoki, that was an absolute hit. And I loved him doing the "You can't see me" gesture as well. The John Cena "You can't see me" after the fact. That was a nice
Yeah.
touch. Uh,
I thought you would have liked that one
although
when I
the
saw the celebration.
yeah, the one thing though that concerns me is we're going to have to hear "shoot" being screamed at him every single week from now on, aren't we? It's going to be like Uzturk uh, when
That's
he
fair.
scored that
That's
goal against Hibs. Every single time he's on the ball, I'll be "shoot," and it's like, right,
to,
okay.
to be
Uh,
fair. To be fair, it'll be between him and Blair Spittle. I think they'll both be getting it.
but yes, oh Spittle. So you mentioned Oyagoki being named man of the match. I personally would have given it to Spittle. He was fantastic the other day, and yeah, I just think that if we've got that much ability going forward and we have so many dangerous players in so many different parts of the pitch, Blair Spittle's been kind of deployed as an inverted winger out on the left for the majority of the game on Saturday. Then you've got your right back smashing in goals with his weak foot, curling, curling in absolute beauties like that. And then you've got Vargas potentially hitting his best. Shankland hasn't really gotten going yet. It's reasons to be cheerful for a Hearts fan for sure.
Oh, completely, completely. And then, like you say, the game again, kind of you touched on it. It sort of hit a bit of a lower ebb again, but to the point where normally I'm sitting there going, this game's not done, this game's not finished. But I think the lack of anything from St Mirren
Mm.
kind of made me feel much more confident.
Yeah, I
Critchley
think it
mentioned
had the same
again.
effects on the players as well. I think
Mhm,
the players seem to feel the same. I think that much like when we went 1-0 up, the players took a step back and were like, right, what have St Mirren got in response? And they
mhm.
saw that there was absolutely nothing coming. And so then they started to push again. Um, And they've of course got a third goal through wee James Wilson, who I'm absolutely thrilled for. You seeing his wee face on the highlights after the fact when I watched it back, you can see pure joy in his face, and that's where I'm going to bring up the George Burley comparison that I was going to touch on earlier.
Okay.
The difference in Neil Critchley that I feel is the key aspect that has led to that win is how much he just seems to enjoy what he does. He was smiling. He always looked happy. Like at no point was he berating players and stuff. And obviously there was nothing, to be fair, on Saturday to shout at. Like Hearts were fantastic, but seeing a manager on the touchline smiling and having a laugh and just enjoying the fact that he's on the touchline managing the game, I felt that rubbed off on the players. They seemed a lot more relaxed than they have in weeks. And when teams are relaxed, it's easier to play attacking football. You can't play attacking football, free-flowing football, when you're tight and when you're anxious and when you're low in confidence. And I feel that that's exactly what he brings to the table, is he's inspiring confidence in the players with how loose he is. If your manager's loose and smiling and having a good time on the touchline, it's more likely that you're going to be the same. And that was what George Burley brought to Hearts when he was at Hearts back in 2005, 2006. Robbie Nielsen, I've mentioned it, I think, before to you, was on did an interview with Scarves Around the Funnel talking about his team talks back in the day, and he would just put a board up with the formation that the team was likely to use, and he'd point his wee stick at things at players and go, "He's shite, you'll do him. He's shite. See him, utter shite." And I think that mentality in a league like ours, it's probably not going to work in the English Premier League because it's a different stratosphere. But at our level, that kind of attitude is half the battle. Having a positive attitude and wanting to attack is one thing. The looseness that a confident, happy manager can bring the players is, an enormous step even further. And I think that is ultimately what Neil Critchley is bringing to the table. That is the fundamental difference. That plus his attention to very little details, like the little details, like you mentioned at the game. You turned around to me at one point and said, "Have you noticed that every single ball that's close to the touchline, Hearts are fighting to keep in play? They didn't want the game to stop at any point. At every point that it was potentially going to go out of play, the Hearts players were desperate to keep it in play and keep the ball moving." That's a huge difference, and it's a little kind of fundamental detail that is very easily missed. But Critchley has obviously identified that need for urgency, and the fact that if you press a team like St Mirren, there's not much that they can do to defend it when you have players of Hearts' talent playing to their talent. And that was just wonderful, and you could see that, I felt, in no place better than in James Wilson when he scored that goal. Just the levity and the feeling of like a weight being lifted, not just from him getting his first goal, not just from Vargas getting his first goal of the season, but from the stadium itself, like the crowd as well. There was a collective weight that was just lifted on Saturday. And I feel that that's ultimately the part of the equation that Critchley is bringing. And it's early days. We don't want to obviously get carried away. We could very easily lose the next three, and all of a sudden it'll be Critchley out. I just hope that Pants Chaton better have a decent wee pun on his poll. It'll be Critchley or Ditchley or something, I kind of feel like I should get Twitter again just so I can see it.
I'll keep you posted on that one.
You definitely have to, mate. Yeah, but yeah, it's I'm sorry, I kind of interrupted you there.
No, I was just you're absolutely fine.
Just the levity that he brings and brought on Saturday, and the confidence that seemed to give the players as the game went along. And like we've said, we've touched on it, after 1-0, we took that step back. And of course, there's that moment of, oh shit, here we go again. But St Mirren didn't bring any sort of threat. And then we go 2-0. And then again, they take that step back. And there's always that feeling of, if they can get one back with this Hearts team the way they've been this year, there's no reason they can't get two back and then potentially get a stoppage time winner or something. But it never came. And so you get that third goal, and it was a scrappy goal that came out of what Laurie Dunsire likes to call a goal mouse stramash. That's his trademark. You know how much I love a Laurie Dunsire stramash. And then, by that point, you're talking it's 80 plus minutes. It's pretty much game over at that stage. But
Yeah,
At no point did I feel like we were in any danger, and that I think is a testament to how much more organised they were. And you made the point right off the offset, at the outset rather, the comments that Critchley made about we need to be better in both boxes. Boy, did they deliver!
completely, completely. I
You know,
think,
It was Kai Roll's best Hearts game in a long time, potentially his best game in a
yeah,
Hearts jersey. Period. Frankie
yeah,
Kent was Mr. Reliable as per. Penrice is very quickly becoming one of my favourite Hearts players. He is outstanding at left back. Maybe he's not an Alex Cochrane in terms of like his technical ability and his flashiness, but he wins headers. He works so hard. He's a proper good old fashioned Scottish fullback, and
yeah,
I'm just really liking what I'm seeing from James Penrice. He's given 100% effort to the jersey, and that's all you can really ask, and it's paying dividends
yeah.
ultimately.
Yeah, I think we'll move on shortly to talk about the European game, and then obviously a small matter of an Edinburgh derby at the end of the week. But just something I wanted to kind of touch on before we kind of move on was the substitutions that were made during the game, and one in particular was Lauren Shanklin getting taken off with 25 minutes to go. Now that as I said about the
Miserable
Critchley
want away
appointment,
Heart star.
oh,
The
but
miserable want away Heart star, Lorna Shanklin, you mean?
yeah, but it's funny because that kind of echoed the Neil Critchley appointment news, and a lot of people just jump straight for the negative and go, he didn't look very happy when he was getting taken off the pitch, and
Yeah.
he went straight down the tunnel. He didn't come out at full time to applaud the fans and the rest of it.
Yeah.
And I feel like to say that your captain is in a huff is utter nonsense. I think he played 65 minutes, and you touched on it earlier. He had a hamstring complaint. It would not have surprised me in the slightest if that substitution was pre-planned between him and Critchley, saying, "How
It
long
was
can you give me?"
100%. It was 100% pre-planned.
Of
As you
course it
know,
was. Of course
Alan,
it was.
I've had two major hamstring injuries in the last 3 years. A hamstring problem is not pleasant. So if you're carrying a hamstring issue, you're not going to be running around
No.
laughing and joking and having the best day of your life. He was quite
Yeah.
clearly in discomfort by the end of that 65 minutes. The fact that he
Yeah.
gave us over an hour is astonishing, quite frankly. Like a hamstring problem is not something to be trifled with. He
No, and I
put in a
think,
fantastic shift even with that. So yeah,
yeah,
100% that's going to be pre-planned. He's not going to be able to go to 90.
yeah, no, and I
It's
think
just
obviously
yeah,
people jump to conclusions and say, "Oh, he's in a huff. He's not happy because he's been subbed off." And ultimately,
mhm.
again, like I say, I feel like that's utter tosh because I think
Of
this is
course.
a guy that he pulled out of the Scotland squad, and I don't think Shankland is the sort of person that would have done that lightly.
No,
Because obviously he wants to
no,
try and
he's
get
done
as
all
many
this work to
chances.
get into the Scotland squad.
Yeah, yeah, and I think when
He's not
you
going
look
to.
at him, I think he's. This is just the point I kind of wanted to make before we move on a little bit. The way that the reason he's unhappy, the reason he's in a huff is because his team have scored 4 goals and he's not got one. I genuinely think that's what it is because the goals are just not falling for him right now. It doesn't mean that he's not had a good game, but it's just that little last bit just isn't quite falling for him. He had a shot in the first half that he dragged
Yeah.
wide in a couple of moments, but you know, he's got high standards of himself and he's not happy that he's coming off when he's not got a
Yeah.
goal. But like you said about the sort of positive atmosphere in the stadium, there was a real cheer and a real lift when the armband was given to Craig Gordon in goal, which I really loved as well. It was really nice to see that. But yeah, just the sort of last point that I'll make before I talk about the last goal. And I said this to you at the time. I think the substitutions that Critchley made were very, very good. And I think a lot of them had obviously Thursday night in mind, the game against Omonia Nicosia. He takes Shankland off with 25 minutes to spare. He takes off Benny with about 15 minutes to spare. Vargas went off with 10 minutes to spare, and then obviously James Wilson came on. It's encouraging to me that Critchley sees Vargas and Wilson as players that can be interchangeable. I spoke about Vargas's pace and the way he gets in behind. James Wilson's not slow. He can move. I'm not saying he's as quick as Vargas, but he can certainly move and stretch defences. But the thing that I kind of noticed about James Wilson as well was he seemed to be a bit more filled out. I know he's a young lad, but I remember sort of seeing him and he seemed a wee bit weedy and he seemed a wee bit like a young kid. And he is a young kid, like he's only 17, 18 years old. But he seems to be filling out a bit. And I don't know if he's putting in extra work in the gym or extra work or whatever. Maybe if there's dietitians or whatever at the club, there might be an element of that he's trying to grow into himself a little bit. And obviously, I was buzzing for his goal as well. And I said it to a few people, your first goal for Hearts, you probably envisage twatting it in for the top corner from 30 yards. But ultimately, if you're gonna get
Yeah.
in amongst a goal mouth smash, as long as it's in the net, it doesn't matter. I think he even gets a knee to it, and he runs off absolutely buzzing with himself. And I always say this when you see like an academy player or a young player that's a Heart supporter coming through, he's living the dream of a fan, and scoring a goal at Tynecastle in front of a full Tynecastle as well was massive, and that should hopefully do him wonders, because he's clearly going to get the game time under Critchley, because it's one of those. I know obviously Critchley's got a background of developing young players, which will be a massive help for Wilson, you would hope. But there is that element for me that I thought, is he going to come in and go, he's not ready yet? But clearly he thinks he is, and clearly he is. He seems to be. The players, when he scored, the players were all crowding around him, absolutely buzzing for him, which was just a really, really nice touch. And then obviously the game moved on, and if three wasn't enough, we decided to score a fourth with Blair Spittle, who again we haven't really touched on much. I thought his energy and his work rate and his enthusiasm for the dirtiness of the game. He was sliding in, winning the ball back. He was putting himself about.
Yeah.
The pressing. He spoke after the game. He did the press conference, and he was asked about like what Critchley has asked of him to do, and he basically said, "Just get after the ball, just press and get after it and be involved." And Critchley, I think, highlighted him as a player that he really likes his mentality, and that for a new manager that's only been in the door for less than a week at that point fills me with a lot of encouragement that Spittle could be one of those players that we do see grow and become a very important sort of piece in the Neil Critchley Hearts side. I mentioned it to you, and there was a few comparisons floating about a certain Sir Paul Hartley comparison with Blair Spittle, and obviously it's one very good game. He was very good against Aberdeen as well. It might be a little bit early to call shouts like that, but I can see it. I can see the comparisons. I can see why people are making those
Yeah.
comparisons, and it's nice, like you said about Danda not managing to get on the score sheet. He will in time. There's no doubt of that. But
Yes.
having goal scoring threats and genuine goal scoring threats from midfield is something we have not had for a very long time. So if Blair Spittle and the rest can bring that, that's a massive step forward.
Completely agree. Yeah. Like I said earlier, Blair Spittle for me was my man in the match. He got his body around. He was constantly fighting for pretty much every ball. With regards to Paul Hartley comparisons, I think he has shown flashes of that during his time in Scottish football prior to joining Hearts. I don't think that he's necessarily been allowed the opportunity so far in his Hearts career to do so. Um, Definitely was being deployed in the wrong areas when he was being played deeper. Certainly, we had talked about it was more of a dynamic box to box type midfielder, and in fact, he was deployed out wide in this game. It feels like he is very versatile, but certainly more of an attacking minded player than anything else.
Yeah.
Blair Spittle, what we need is a guy like that who is 90% effort and 10% skill in that kind of area of the pitch. A guy who just wants to win the ball back when he loses it, and when he's got it, he wants to do something productive with it.
Yeah,
He played
completely.
such a great part on Saturday, and couldn't have been more thrilled with Blair's performance. And it's good to see a guy who had to. I mean, he had to have been getting a bit frustrated by some of the ways that he was being deployed in the
Oh,
early part of the
completely.
season. As a professional footballer, he's been doing this a few years now. He's not like really young. Spittle's 26 years old, I think. You're
Yeah,
talking about a
I
guy
think
who's
so.
hitting his prime of his career. He's not a young kid who, well, let's experiment with this and that for him. He's got an established name and an established style of play. And we weren't exploiting that properly. So for him to finally get that chance to show it and to perform to that level, absolutely thrilled for him. And yeah, he was a key part of the win on Saturday.
Yeah, definitely. And it was just nice to have something to celebrate. And Critchley was asked after the game,
Yeah.
could you have dreamt of a better day? And he was like, no, you go to bed and you dream of goals and clean sheets. But yeah, to see that play out in the way that it did, it was the definition of new manager bounce, I think, is the best
Yeah.
way to put it. And obviously, moving on, in time of recording, in 2 days from today, we have a home tie, our second tie in the Conference League against Omonia Nicosia. Um, I think, like I said, the substitutions that Critchley made against St Mirren probably had that game in mind, as well as obviously the derby at the weekend. But I think we might see some changes to the lineup for the Omonia Nicosia game. I think there'll be maybe two or three. I would think maybe even three or four off the top of my head. I think that we can rotate, and I'm not saying we should take Omonia Nicosia lightly, but Critchley will want a good European night for himself. Obviously the last one was Liam Fox's night, but Critchley will want to sort of say, right, I'm here, I want to put my mark on this. But obviously, the best game to put your mark on it as a new manager comes on the weekend, which we'll speak about.
Yes.
But I think I'm intrigued about what he's going to do against Omonia Nicosia. I've just looked it up there. They've lost their last two games. They won 4-0 in their opening Conference League tie, 4-0 against, I think it was Vikingur, I think they played. I've literally just looked at it, so that's embarrassing that I've forgotten already. But yeah, like there is an element of the unknown about them.
It was
And I'll be
Vikingur.
honest,
Vikingur Reykjavik. It was who they played. Yeah.
that's it. Yeah, I looked at it 2 seconds ago and then forgot. My memory is that bad. But as I say, people that have listened and watched this for a long time will know that my memory is terrible. Um, but yeah, there is an element of the unknown about it for me, to be honest. But again, like I've said about the opening Conference League game, I'm treating the Conference League as a bit of an exhibition this season, just trying to build a bit of confidence and get us going. I don't know what your thoughts on it are, but obviously for me, and I think for most people, the main focus and the main game point is obviously the derby on the weekend.
100%, yeah. And I think it would be foolhardy of the Hearts support to place too much importance on the midweek game. I certainly think you will see changes. I think any Hearts fan would probably want any Hearts manager to be prioritising the Edinburgh Derby at Easter Road on the weekend, particularly with the position that we find ourselves in. Our first and only priority right now should be getting out of the bottom six. To get out of the bottom six, we have to get out of the relegation zone first. And to do that, we have to start winning league games with consistency.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine that we're going to see quite a few changes as well, just in terms of, well, one, I would probably start Xander Clark, and I know that that's probably the most shocking thing you've ever heard me say. But with the head knock that Craig Gordon took on the weekend, I would probably be looking
Yeah.
to give him a bit of a rest ahead of the derby. I would be starting Cammy Devlin because he, one, plays very well in Europe, and two, is going to want some starts. He's going to get unhappy if he doesn't get to start some games. You have to juggle the player expectations as well as the form.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's going to be some changes made. Spittle had a bit of a groin thing going on. It looked like he got a bit of cramp at the weekend. He seemed to be fine, but you want to take a good look at some of that. Benny went off quite gingerly as well when he was substituted. So you want to be taking a look at some of these players and keeping them as fresh as possible for the weekend, because you want to keep a settled starting lineup from St Mirren in the league game.
Mm-hmm.
And like you say, the Conference League very much a bonus this year. I don't think that we should really be prioritising that all that much. You want to do well and you want to put in a performance, and obviously there's a financial incentive that comes with doing well there. But with the start that we've had, you've kind of had to rip those expectations of potentially challenging for whatever the playoffs in the league phase. I really don't like this new format. I'm just going to be honest. We've kind of had to rip anything like that up and prioritise getting out of the relegation zone early on this season.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, make plenty of changes, but I expect it to be a decent game, and certainly Omonia and Nicosia are a team that are more than capable of giving us trouble if we take it too lightly.
Yeah.
But I would not be prioritising that over the Edinburgh Derby on Sunday.
No, and I think the main sort of thing for me, and I mentioned this previously, is the fact that our next four games, the furthest we have to travel is Easter Road. So you do kind of want a bit of momentum and a bit of
Yeah.
positivity, and the best way to be going into an Edinburgh Derby is getting a win, obviously against St Mirren and the nature of it, and then Ammonia Nicosia, whatever will happen will happen. But if we see a level of intensity that's similar to the game against St Mirren, against Ammonia, regardless of what the result ends up being, I'll be happy with that. And then obviously the Edinburgh Derby that follows, Hearts have had their worst league start for a very, very long time. And yet Hibs, the comedy football club that they are, have somehow found a
Yeah.
way to be bottom of the table whilst we occupy 11th
Yeah.
place following the win against St Mirren. But we it's funny,
Yeah.
just before I give you an Ashy for your predictions for the derby. When we were leaving Tynecastle on the weekend, and this is where it comes down to the comedy aspect of Hibs. We were leaving Tynecastle on the weekend, and I had checked my phone, and Hibs were winning 2-1 in the 90th minute, and I just assumed, well, they've won. That's fine. And then as we were walking out, the Hibs are falling apart chants began, and I'm thinking, but they won. I'm sure it was full time when I looked at my phone, and then I pulled my phone out and realised that they'd in fact
Yeah.
somehow managed to manufacture losing 3 goals to 2,
Yes.
and
I think it
that
was 2-2 that your phone showed, was it not, when we were leaving? It showed 2-2.
yeah, it
And
did.
then it was after we had left that you,
Yeah,
I think it wasn't until we were in McDonald's that you showed me your phone again, and it was the 3-2 Dundee United with the Hibs sending off.
true. That was what it was. That was
Um,
what it was. But
it was
like I
it
say,
was just superb.
yeah, and I think, like I say, the Edinburgh Derby, there is an element of anything can happen, but like I say, I'm in a much more positive frame of mind than I was maybe a couple of weeks ago, and that should lead forward. The players should be feeling a lot more confident, a lot happier, a lot more just enjoying their football. And I know it's only one game that we've played under Critchley's management, but there is massive positives to be taken from that. And I think Hibs at the moment are at the opposite end of that scale. I think David Gray is under serious pressure from his fan base. I don't think he's under pressure from the club itself, which is, I think, also feeding into the fan base being negative. It almost feels like we've kind of flipped with Hibs in that regard. We had it with Naismith, and fans calling for Naismith to get sacked much earlier than it happened. And there were some Hibs fans when David Gray got given the job that didn't even want him. So, it's there's a man under pressure there. There's a manager that's certainly under pressure there. But I don't, and I've said this to a few people, the Hibs side doesn't fear me. Like, I don't fear any of them. Like, I look at their team and I think there's maybe one or two that I think, yeah, okay, if they have a good game, they could cause us some trouble. But I don't see any Hibs player getting into our starting 11, being honest.
No,
And
absolutely
that,
not.
I'm maybe setting it all up for us to lose at Easter Road, but I genuinely don't feel like, and it's funny because people have often said this to me, like Edinburgh derbies, I don't feel nervous about them anymore. I used to feel a little bit nervous about them, but now I just look at them and I go, it's a game of football. You know, if we turn up and play the best that we can win that game, and that's for me the priority, obviously, like we said.
Yep.
But yeah, just before we wrap it up there, John, I'm going to ask you quickly to give me your thoughts on the Edinburgh Derby, followed by a potential score prediction, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so you mentioned there your lack of fear of Hibs, and I think that is it's indicative of the strides that we've taken as a club in the last few years. That we are no longer nervous about the Edinburgh Derby. What we get nervous about is going to Parkhead and going to Ibrox and playing the Old Firm. I think that's probably the best indicator out of all of them of the strides that we've taken under the current leadership of the board and with the talent that has come to Gorgie in the last few years. I certainly don't fear Hibs. I feel like we should be winning that game. Ultimately, the ball is in the Hearts players' court. If they turn up, they do the job. They should keep the same levels of intensity that they did this past weekend. There is no reason to believe that we will get anything other than 3 points out of that. If they don't turn up and they disappoint us, then we're potentially going to be in trouble. Ultimately, the entire equation rests with the effort levels from the Hearts players. Will their effort levels match their talent like they did on Saturday there, or will they not turn up? And that's ultimately the massive question. Which Hearts are we going to get? Are we going to get Critchley's Hearts from the weekend, or are we going to get Hearts from the first 2+ months of the season again? And ultimately, that's Neil's job, is to get them ready for that, and it's ultimately the players' job to keep that level of intensity up. In terms of a score prediction, I think Hearts will win it. It is an Edinburgh derby, so it's not going to be a laugh riot. It's going to be a pretty scrappy game. I'm going to suggest two. Do you know what? I'm feeling confident. I'm going to say 2-0. I was going to say 2-1, but I can see us keep another clean sheet. I think it's going to
You
be 2-0
know,
Hearts.
Do you know, it's funny, we've done score predictions on this podcast very often over the last few seasons that we've done them, and Ewan and I always tend to agree, and we always tend to steal each other's score predictions, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing, because on the tip of my tongue, just as you said, I'm feeling confident,
Yeah.
I was thinking, I'm going to go say 2-0, I'm going to say 2-0, and then when you said 2-1, I thought,
Yeah.
we're going to have a different answer here, but then you reverted and went to 2-0, and I feel exactly the same way. Hopefully,
Yeah.
Lauren Shanklin finds his goal scoring boots between now and then and takes out any
He does
frustration
love a
that
goal
he's
against
had.
the Hibs, to be fair. Yeah.
Yeah. If he could save it to like not be in the last minute though, that would be greatly appreciated this time. But yes, we'll
Don't
leave
get
it
me
there
wrong.
for
I'll
today.
take a 1-0. I'll take a 1-0 with a stoppage
Oh,
time winner. But yeah, I
I
would
think I
rather
think
I would rather be like a wee bit more comfortable than that this time around.
I think that's a default answer for us at the moment. Just give me a scrappy 1-0 win. I don't really care.
Yes.
But yeah, we'll leave it there for this week, folks. If you are in attendance at Tynecastle on Thursday night for the Ammonia Nicosia game, hope you have an amazing time. And if you are going to be in the away end at Easter Road on Sunday, give it everything, because I'm sure the players will appreciate that, and the response and the backing.
Have a hot shower when you get home from that one.
Completely. Maybe a change of clothes as well might be helpful.
Yes.
But aye,
take a change with you in a bag so you can change in the toilet on the way out, just to be on the safe side.
Yeah, good plan. Before we go, yeah, I echo that sentiment, and as ever, John, thanks for your contribution. Even those last 3 words are perfect way to wrap it up there, folks. Have a good one, and
pleasure to be
take
back,
care.
mate.
Nice one. Take care. Bye for now.